Welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most interesting topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 204th edition of Assembly Call Radio and our 684th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of March 4th, 2021. I'm your host, Andy Bottoms. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
Kind of a hodgepodge of potential options for the banner moment for tonight. One of them could certainly be the IU women's team, who I talked about in the banner moment last week. They won 2 more games since then, thanks to a couple of big fourth quarter hammer drops on Ohio State and Iowa. They've now won 8 straight games, and that most recent win over Iowa gave them a sweep of the Hawkeyes. Now both men's teams have done that as IU Athletics continues to declare vengeance on Gary Barta. We had a great interview, I thought, with Scott Dolson on the House of Hoosier podcast with AJ Guyton. At the end of it, they really got into a little bit. Obviously, AJ couldn't ask things super specific about the men's program and kind of Dolson's thoughts around that, but I thought his answers to that were interesting and about clearly understanding the criticism and feeling that and wanting to win as much as anybody and wanting that excellence that he was a part of starting back in his days as a manager. And so I thought that was an interesting listen. I think he came across as definitely having his finger on the pulse of the feelings of people about the men's team. And there's a little bit of a difference between having your finger on the pulse of that and totally being able to do something about it from a financial perspective. So I think that's a question that really we'll dive into in the offseason as we go. But I thought it was some interesting insight from him in terms of his background, and would recommend people listening to that. And finally, Coach Tonsoni is not on tonight as he is knee deep in film study for Western's next game in the sectional semifinals, which comes up on Friday against Twin Lakes. They beat West Lafayette on Wednesday night, I believe it was, 54-39. They jumped out to a 27-10 lead at the half, and I texted with Coach a little bit after the game, and in typical Coach fashion, there was a lot of there was excitement, but there was a lot of focus on what they needed to do better and what they didn't do well in the second half. So they're preparing for that game against Twin Lakes, and that game also marked the end of West Lafayette's coach Dave Wood's career, retiring after 27 years there, coaching a number of players, including our own Jared Morris. Coach Wood did give this quote after the game. I'll leave it up to everyone to decide where Jared falls in this, but he said, "Coaching is not fun when you're coaching turds, and it's a boatload of fun when you're coaching great kids. About 99% of the kids we've had here have been great young men." Again, I'll leave it to everyone to assume which part of that 99% or the 1% Jared falls in. But I think we all know really which part Jared falls in. But I thought it was a good comment. I know he's had great things to say about Coach Wood, as has Coach Tonsoni. So wishing him a happy retirement. So with that, I'll introduce my co-host for tonight. To my left,
analyzing players, finding every wrinkle. He hasn't ever hosted, never lifted a finger. He's got all the answers.
Well, let me quickly add just one thing about this.
Dude just interrupted his own jingle.
He is Ryan Phillips. Ryan, Jared implored you in the run sheet here to rant gently, as it's been a long season.
No. I'm not going to do that. No, I think we all know after Saturday where we are as a program, where Indiana is as a program, where we are as fans and all that. And I think that it has been a long season, and it was a season we expected to not feel like a long season. And so all I'll say is that I think that we all know where the people on, the regulars on this podcast sit on things, and just think that we've seen the same thing a lot, and there hasn't really been a whole lot of improvement. And so I just don't, I wrote it on Twitter. I wrote it in an article. I just don't understand what doing this for another year is going to do with Archie Miller. I don't see this team getting tremendously better this offseason. They're going to lose, more than likely going to lose their best player. And they kind of whiffed on some big time recruits. And they're bringing in Logan Duncombe, who's a nice player, but he's not Cody Zeller. He's not going to come in and turn the program around. And so I just think that, that's where we're at heading into a final game on the road at Purdue, a team that Archie Miller has not been able to beat in his tenure. And this is, it just feels like the season's going to end with a whimper. I hope they prove me wrong and go out and beat Purdue and then can take some teams out in the Big Ten tournament, completely turn this around. But given the patterns we've seen over the last 4 years, I just don't see that happening. I have no reason to believe, even if they do come up with a big win somewhere, I have no reason to believe they're going to follow it up with a win after that. And that's been an issue for this team and for this program over the last 4 years. So I think that we all know where we're at and we all know what to expect. And we've been trained to feel this way for a long time. I think that loss in East Lansing that game in East Lansing had a chance to be a big thing for this team. And it wound up being, it wound up turning out how a lot of games this year have turned out, where the team's in a close game late and just wilts and makes bad decisions and can't hit shots and can't do the things it needs to do. And so we move on and Purdue's this weekend on the road, and we'll see what happens after that. But I just get the feeling, and I get the feeling from the fan base, man. I hear from them all. I think a lot of people are just tired of this merry-go-round.
All right, and to my right, making his return to the assembly call, he is the voice of your top 10 Indiana Hoosiers women's basketball team and a soon-to-be sleep-deprived expectant father. He is Greg Murray. Greg, welcome back to the show, and what are your opening thoughts? The women also have Purdue this weekend, so as the women's season gets to start to wind down, we wanted to have you back on and kind of talk about their success and where they sit heading into the NCAA tournament. But opening thoughts from you on how the season's been so far. Odd, I'm sure, but exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. I appreciate you guys having me back. It's an exciting time heading into March. And, with these guys going in as they're a 2 seed for next week's Big Ten tournament, regardless of what happens in this final game of the regular season. And it's going to be fun. Potential to win the tournament in Indy next week at Bankers Life Fieldhouse. The men's tournament's obviously coming to Indiana. The women are doing something similar, but going down to the San Antonio area. So they'll go straight from Indy, hop on a flight, go down to Texas, and hoping for a really long road trip. And especially with the way that, the season ended for a team that was in the top 20 last year, they brought a core group on the women's side back this year with higher expectations. And to this point, they've more or less lived up to it. It should be a fun month for the women's program.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're definitely going to talk more about, kind of how they've been successful this year, but also a bit of a look ahead to some of the things you mentioned, both the Big Ten tournament and the NCAA tournament this week. And so as we move forward with the show, we are going to touch on a bit of the continued struggles for the men's team down the stretch here. I don't know that, as Ryan said, there's a whole lot of new ground to cover on that front, which is among the reasons that we wanted to have Greg back on. And so we'll talk about how Terry Morin and the women are turning in the best season in school history and how far they can go once that tournament starts in San Antonio. And then we'll answer your questions as we always do. All of that coming up on this edition of Assembly Call Radio. And before we do that, let's talk about insulation, specifically Superior Insulation from our friends at Superior Insulators. They will make your life more comfortable by helping you fix drafty rooms, cold floors, and even excess noise. Plus, their systems help you save money through lower utility bills. More comfort and cost savings, that's a Mackenzie Holmes double-double right there. And with winter here, now is the perfect time to invite Brad and his team out to your home or business so they can do for you what they've already done for IU. Yes, the Superior Insulators did all the air barrier systems and spray foam for the new IU Excellence Academy. Brad and his team also worked on the new football locker room, Marching 100 Hall, and many other buildings around campus. Their owner Brad and his team are Hoosiers through and through and damn good at what they do. And check this out. They have a special offer for Assembly Call listeners. You will get a $50 home field apparel gift card when you call and schedule an appointment in a qualifying area. And the Superior Insulators have 4 locations covering roughly the southern 2/3 of Indiana plus the northern part of Kentucky. Just tell them the Assembly Call sent you to get your gift card. So go visit insulators.com or just Google Superior Insulation to learn more and schedule your appointment. Then Brad and his team can help you create a healthier, quieter, and more energy-efficient home. That's insulators.com. INSEALATORS.com to learn more, and tell them the Assembly Call sent you to get your $50 home field apparel gift card. All right, so as we turn to the headlines, as IU has now lost 4 in a row on the men's side of things, following the loss at Michigan State on Tuesday. And I saw the Michigan State game tonight was having roughly the same number of fouls called in it as the IU game. And at this point, any NCAA tournament hopes feel like they've gone out the window for IU. I looked earlier on the bracket matrix as of March 3rd, they were in just 6 of the 131 brackets, and I don't know that I'm not really sure what would compel the 6 to have them in there, to be honest.
Were they updated?
As somebody who looks at that regularly, there are a few, I will say, there are a few on there who are done more analytically, or just like they kind of let an algorithm spit out who would be in the field. So I'm assuming it's something of that, but who knows? And then the other piece of that, and this is the part, Ryan, I really want to get your thoughts on, is you're starting to see some of the national media talking about Archie being on the hot seat. Jeff Borzello had listed him in an article, and he kind of called IU, quote, maybe the biggest elephant in the room entering this spring's coaching carousel. Pat Forty threw out Scott Drew's name at some point, and so we're going to save deep dives on the coaching position for the offseason. But Ryan, as somebody who's in the same world as some of the folks talking about these things, either are there things that you're hearing, or even does the national media picking up some of that talk, does that indicate anything to you? Just general thoughts on kind of the way those articles and other opinions are trending out there.
I'd just like to say this hat arrived about 10 minutes ago, so go to thebiglead.com. That's why I'm wearing it, advertising. I've also got a simple call on those.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I'm really just plugging everything I do here. What I've heard and what's floating around, and look, you talk to 20 different sources, you're going to get 18 different opinions, and a couple are going to line up. And what I've heard is that the people at Indiana are not. I think a few months ago, everyone thought there's no way there'll be any coaching changes because of the financial situation and all this. And the people at Indiana, there's no way Archie's getting a 5th year. From what I've heard, that's not necessarily true. I would say odds that Archie gets a 5th year are better than they should be because of the situation. But if we were in a normal situation, there'd be no question. I don't think. I think that they're better than they would be in a normal year, but they're not overwhelming as we thought they were a few months ago. I've been told that if they think that there's a massive upgrade that they can land, there's a chance that things change. And that doesn't mean that it will happen. That means that the winds are certainly blowing, because normally what you hear at this time of year is we're sticking with our coach no matter what. We believe in his vision, all of that stuff. And I'm not saying attributing this to Dolson. I'm not attributing this to anybody directly in the athletic department. I'm just hearing there are lots of whispers and rumors out there that something that seemed about a month and a half ago seemed completely unlikely feels a lot more likely to happen. And again, that's not even saying it's over 50%, but it's far more likely than it was 6 weeks ago. And I think that people have seen that I think part of it is that we've seen it's a swirling pattern. Things just continue to happen the same way that they happened 4 years ago when there's disappointment. And so I think that the people in power are starting to understand that they can't just keep doing this. Now, that doesn't mean that he doesn't come back. It doesn't mean that it's not going to happen, but there's a lot more chatter about things than there was a while ago. And certainly than there was coming into this season. Before this season, I heard a lot of people say that Archie has something to prove, but not if he doesn't prove it, he's going to get let go. I just think there's a lot more chatter now than I probably expected there to be a few months ago.
Yeah, Greg, I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the job Terry Morin's done at IU. And I know this is not by any means an apples to apples comparison in terms of, what the expectations were for, when she came in to take over the women's program versus what Archie came into on the men's side based on history and all kinds of other factors. But as you look at the job that she and her staff have done, are there certain things that really stand out to you that have allowed them to be so successful when others haven't been able to on the women's side of things here?
Yeah, well, I think what you said is a good way to, I guess, enter this answer, is that it is not an apples to apples comparison, different sports, completely different situations, of course. But what's really impressed me with Coach Morin and this staff is just the steady climb that they've had. They were a game under 500 in year one. Tyra Buss and Amanda Cahill became household names when it comes to IU women's basketball. They were freshmen when Coach Moran first came on. And so they helped build the base of success. They got to an NCAA tournament. They won the NIT their senior years. And then the big switch in my mind was that second big group of recruits when Tyra and Amanda were on their way out, and you were able to shuffle in some different players. And now we're seeing Grace Bergers and Allie Patberg and Mackenzie Holmes, who are continuing to build up the momentum. And it's just step after step after step. You know, a few years ago, I remember they went to the NCAA tournament and lost to Notre Dame in round 2. And Notre Dame was hosting. They were a 1 seed. Muffet McGraw, you know, a blue blood program, very, very strong. They lost to them. And I think in one of the pregame press conferences or media availabilities, there was talks or a question for Coach Moran of, well, are you maybe wanting to sign up for a non-conference game, get something going with Notre Dame as an in-state foe? And she openly said, you know, we're not ready for that. And now it's at the position where they're ready for anybody. You know, they try and play that tough non-conference schedule. They're as talented as anyone inside the Big Ten, but it's just been a steady climb every single year that's consistent. And it's not like this is a group of seniors that's all going to move on. It's not a one-hit wonder type deal. They have young talent, veteran talent, and it's mixed for a really good group and a good program.
Yeah, they've done a really nice job of integrating some different pieces, whether they be transfers and young players, to the point where they've really got enough where, at least for the foreseeable future, it doesn't feel like there's going to be a drop-off as you lose just a transformational class and the bottom drops out and then you kind of start back over. It definitely seems like they've gotten to that point, and I think the steady climb is a good way to talk about it. So real quick before we take a break, I know, Greg, when we had you on before the season, we were talking a little bit about what it was going to be like to broadcast the games in this particular season. Just kind of curious to get some quick thoughts on how odd that's really been and how it's worked out overall.
It's been good. It's been good. It's not been great, which I guess was the expectation. Home games are different without the fans, but just from a broadcast setup, I broadcast with a mask on. Everybody, you know, outside of the players have masks on. And so that's obviously an adjustment to be screaming into a microphone for 2 hours with a mask on. And then on the road, I'm not traveling. So I have the home studio all set up. It's not exactly where I'm at now, but you know, I have my setup, and now my neighbors know all about IU women's basketball from hearing me through the walls. And, you know, I give a lot of credit and have to thank, you know, all the video crews and people that help set up all the feeds from the different schools. Some work better than others. Internet is usually good enough. You know, the connection gets a little blurry, but, you know, it gets to a point where you kind of embrace it. When I'm broadcasting games, I always try and at least announce a couple of times that, you know, I can't see everything. I don't know what the officials are looking at the monitor because I can't see what they're, you know, the hand signal. I have no idea what they're doing. So you're kind of at the mercy of whatever's, you know, on the screen. So it's good enough to get through this season, certainly, but at the same time, I'm hoping it's not good enough where they don't let me travel when things go back to being normal again. Yeah,
let's hope so for sure. So, all right.
Yeah, there's got. I have a quick question, Greg. Do you feel like you missed some stuff not being in the arena?
You know, it's so each school does it a little bit differently in the feed that I get sent. Some of them are just that essentially they're what you see on TV, just without the broadcaster. So just the raw big screen. Others send like a multi-view where it's like 3 or 4 camera angles where there's going to be one focused on the bench, one follows the individual player. And that helps me from being
keep an eye on everything.
Yeah, that helps me see everything. But at the same time, I have it on my laptop and I put it on an HDMI up to a video screen. But by breaking it up into 3 or 4 screens, it's also smaller. So that makes it overall a little tougher to see. So it's got its pros and cons. I personally think I can see a basketball game good enough just with that one screen. But there are times, you know, just like the example I used, just small things here and there that I miss or I can't see. And so I either have to guess or look at the stat monitor, you know, the live stats I have next to me to see read what happened or something like that. But it's been an adventure, that's for sure.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick break here on the assembly call, and when we come back, we're going to talk more about the women's team. The men aren't the only game in town, and as Jared wrote here, thank goodness. So we want to talk more about what's working and how good this team can be as we move forward into postseason play, so stick with us. All right. Welcome, everybody.
The thing
mark the time down here. Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
The thing I've noticed about the women's team that impressed me so much is it just feels like every year over the last couple of years, they don't have to have the exact same formula of players. Like the girl who can shoot, the girl who can dribble, the girl who can, it feels like it can be any mix and they're making it work, which has been the most impressive thing. Where with some systems, you've got it. If you don't land this recruit, you're probably going to have a down couple of years, to fit into that system. That's what's been most impressive to me is that they seem to just plug players in and they all work well together, no matter who they've got, where their strengths are.
Well, and truly they work, where if someone goes, 2 of 12 from the floor, in previous years, and with a lot of teams around the country, if one of your starters or top guys is shooting like that, you have no prayer of beating anybody, let alone anybody good. And maybe not a top 10 team, but IU's got enough talent around them that somebody else is going to pick up the slack.
Yeah. Yeah, it just seems like they're a team in every sense, and they're obviously very well coached.
Yeah, they're fun to watch. Coach is not. We did our weekly talk show earlier tonight. She's not happy about giving up 70 plus in 2 straight games. They gave up 80 to Iowa yesterday. Obviously thrilled about the win. They beat a good Iowa team, but she's never happy when you give up 80.
Yeah, that freshman guard for Iowa was unbelievable.
She's a monster. She is a monster.
That game.
Yeah,
that was crazy.
This is my 7th year, so my first year was Coach Morin's first year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You've had a good run, man. It's one of my buddies just got named. We have a relationship, but he is now the play-by-play guy for the Padres, and it's like the previous guy had been there for 40 years, 36 of which were terrible seasons of baseball, and then he picks up right when they're like competitive, and I was like, there are people in the room who have to hate you, right? Like you just come right in when they've got all these guys.
Yeah, it's kind of the same deal with baseball. I hopped over. I took over the year. Sure. So my first year was the year after the World Series year. So it wasn't, perfect timing, but I had that 1 year with Schwarber, and obviously they've been really, really good the entire time I've been there. But replacing Jeremy Gray, who I know had a lot of long springs at Sembauer Field with like 10 fans in the seats, the job changed a little bit.
Yeah, man, that new field is awesome. Every time I drive into town, I'm just like, man, and it's not new anymore. It's been around for a while, but it's still, for those of us who remember that being the intramural fields, it's very different.
Yeah,
yeah. What's the quick scouting report on the baseball team this year?
Saw today, coaches ranked them second or selected them second in the Big Ten. Michigan's the favorite, but they should be able to compete. It's going to be interesting because they're doing conference only, and
oh, really?
44 games, all conference. So like they're going to Minnesota this weekend, but they're playing Rutgers and Minnesota. So it's like they're doing like pods. It's bizarre, but they're trying to make it happen however they can.
Does Minnesota have its own field, or do they play at Target?
No, so they have their own field, but actually this weekend they're playing at the Vikings Stadium because it's indoors and they have some sort of trade-off. They do this every year that, it's early March in Minneapolis. I'm sure there's still snow everywhere.
I've caught games on the Big Ten Network where they were at Target, but I assume that was Big Ten tournament or something.
Yeah, they've done it at Target Field, and I think they may do it maybe a series or two. They have a deal with the Twins, but I know they have a deal with the Vikings to use that facility as an indoor baseball field.
Yeah,
but
that's cool.
That's where they'll be tomorrow.
Makes a lot of sense.
Got a doubleheader tomorrow.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
anything to get inside.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
I'm driving just to Columbus for a couple of soccer games for my daughter on Sunday, and I'm already saying that's like, we don't need to be going north. Why are we going north at this time of year? Why aren't we driving somewhere south if we're going to play? So
who designed the weather?
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, cool. Well, we'll here in about 10 seconds, we'll we'll start the next segment and dig into more on the women's team.
Yeah, start with that. I've got to listen to something for work real quick.
Okay, you're good. All right, I'm going to start here in 5 seconds, so you're good.
This is Verdell Jones. What's better than an epic buzzer beater? The full court dribble and perfectly placed pass to set it all up. And of course celebrating with Hoosier Nation afterwards. So join Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the assembly call after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
Welcome back to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content over at our website, assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to join the chat mob during our unedited live broadcasts or watch those replays and see all the between-segment banter that tonight gave at least a quick discussion of the IU baseball team, then check out our YouTube channel over at youtube.com/assemblycall. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Ryan Phillips and the voice of the women's basketball team, Greg Murray, and wanted to talk and get a little bit in depth on the women's team and how things have gone. So just to set the table for everybody, if you haven't been following closely, they're currently 15-2 in the Big Ten, which puts them in second place behind Maryland, who is 16-1. IU season finale comes on Saturday at home against Purdue. While Maryland finishes versus Penn State on Saturday, IU is locked into the 2 seed for the Big Ten tournament based on tiebreakers. They only played Maryland once and lost to them, but they do have a chance if Maryland would surprisingly lose to Penn State and IU would beat Purdue to get a share of the Big Ten title. And regardless, has been just a tremendously successful season for them. So Greg, just kind of high level thoughts. What components of this team have allowed them to be so successful, really from start to finish this season?
Well, I think with Terry Morin, she prides herself on the defensive end, so that's where you start every year with Indiana, but they've cranked it up on that end. They're giving up about 60 points a game, which is second in the league, and I think top 15 nationally. Offensively, and I guess just overall, anybody on the floor at any given time can beat you. Allie Patberg was my preseason pick for Player of the Year in the league, and although maybe she hasn't been up to those expectations per se, she's been of all-conference status, and I mean, a sixth-year senior running point is typically going to be a pretty good thing, just running the show and things like that. Mackenzie Holmes down in the post as a sophomore is averaging about 18 and 9, something like that. She's had a phenomenal year, just making that leap from freshman year to sophomore year. And then I think in most cases, Grace Berger is probably the most talented player on the floor at any given time. Just her ability to create her own shot and score at the mid-range level, get to the basket. She can occasionally shoot the three, not a huge part of her game, but I think just she can do things that not many other players on the floor can do. And so you have some role players in Nicole Cardano-Hillary, who's really stepped up of late. Alexa Gulbe's a really nice role in the post as well. And you just have a complete package that, they're playing well right now, playing hot at the right time. They've won 8 in a row. Purdue can make it 9 on Saturday, and a team that they've beaten quite often of late. They've dominated that series over the last few years, which is always great to see. And, playing well headed into the postseason.
So is there a player or an aspect of the team that has been the biggest surprise to you based on expectations heading into the season versus what you've actually seen?
I would say one of the few surprises, because this was a team that returned quite a bit from last year, and you kind of knew what you were going to get, just the expectation that the level of play would be a little bit higher. I would say the surprise over the last month has been Nicole Cardano-Hillary, who is a transfer out of George Mason, came on this year. This is her first season and was granted immediate eligibility on that blanket eligibility rule that came out about Christmas time. So Jalen Penn, who was a 4-year starter, this being her 4th year, decided to opt out 6 or 7 games ago for the rest of the season. And so Nicole had to step off the bench and into that starter's role. And she's averaged about 13 points per game since that time. Her 3-ball's starting to fall a little bit more consistently. Her defense, she's an absolute pest. She's one of those. The first person that comes to mind is Aaron Kraft, as far as the person that you love to have on your team, but you just can't stand them if you're up against them. She's that type of player defensively, as far as just being in everybody's face all the time and just a pain to deal with. So truly in the last month, you lose Jalen Penn as a veteran starter. You maybe expect the team to take a step back. And if anything, I think they played certainly as well, if not even better, just gelling and playing well all together and playing well at the right time. So I'd say that's one of, I guess, the surprise was just with that adversity that came in that Nicole was able to fill in so nicely.
Yeah, and she, for her size, has posted a few big rebounding numbers, which is pretty surprising. But she is always in the mix. It feels like whenever I have the games on. So I think
5'6". She had I think 19 rebounds her last 2 games before yesterday. So she's a grinder out there.
Absolutely. So I'm going to give credit where credit is due here. Ari Schifron, who does a number of different things for us at the site, had put some questions in here. So he made my job a little bit easier with some of these. So I'm going to hit a handful of these. We likely won't have a chance to get to all of them. But you talked about Jalen Penn opting out and kind of what that has meant for the team. Depth is probably, if anything, with this team, the biggest concern. They play the starting 5 at this point is among the best starting 5s that anybody has, but there's not a ton of at least consistent contributors coming off the bench. Is there anybody that, how big of a concern do you see that as? And are there any players that maybe could surprise people and really step up when they're called upon, as they invariably will be due to either foul trouble or who knows what else as you head into the tournament play?
Yeah, I mean, foul trouble, injuries, a variety of things obviously can factor in. And I think it's there. I don't know if it's a concern, but it's there. It's noticeable. And so you have players coming off the bench. Yesterday was a prime example. I mentioned Nicole Cardano-Hillary and her defense. She got 2 fouls in the first 2.5 minutes of the first quarter and had to sit for a good portion of the first half. And so after that, you had like a variety of players, freshman and guard and Chloe Moore McNeil. You have a senior in Kiana Worthen. It's more of by committee just to almost fill time until you can get the starters back on. Terry Morin's now in her 7th season and has never had, at least played the way with a really deep team, even back to the Tyra Buss played, all 40 minutes. It seemed like most games. Amanda Cahill played like 38. And so that was just the way that the roster was structured. And so, ideally, obviously you'd want to go a little deeper and play 8, maybe even 9 consistently. But I feel like the bench comes off with very important minutes. Keandra Brown for one of the posts. Grace Wagner's very versatile. On the defensive end, they rely on her. But I think it's more filling spots when Indiana's main contributors need a break on the offensive end. And Coach Morin's been very open with especially the reserves. They bring them on for defense because they have enough scorers on the floor. Come on, do your role on defense, and the offense will take care of itself.
Yeah, it was interesting. That was one of the IU, maybe it was Assembly Call Radio. At some point, I went back through one of the games. I think it was the Ohio State game, and just kind of went through the minutes played of the starters. It was crazy. What is even more amazing about that in some of these cases to me is in that Ohio State game, as an example, they played some of their best basketball in the fourth quarter when you would think they would be just completely exhausted from how many minutes they'd already played, and but instead they seemed to get stronger. And I think you could argue the same thing against Iowa, although I think they were able to sub a little bit more throughout in that one. So Mackenzie Holmes, you mentioned her before. She's I think you're right, about 18 and 8, 18 and 9, something around that. About 3 blocks a game, I think, if I'm remembering correctly from looking at the stats. I mean, just talk a little bit about her development as a sophomore and what she's been able to add to her game and really build on from a really successful freshman season into an extremely successful second season at IU.
Yeah, I think she's got first team all conference in her future whenever that's released here in the next week. She came onto campus and even as more of the 6th player role last year. She's kind of taken Brenna Wise's starting spot, who graduated last year. But even when she was first getting on the floor, her footwork and her ability to remain patient in the paint, make sure she's doing the right thing. Some of those things that I'm sure were taught very, very early on in her basketball game, but she had those skills coming on campus and has now just been able to continue to improve them and hone that craft. She improved her body tremendously from a conditioning standpoint. In her off season in Maine, in the middle of COVID, there's a video out there. I think she put it on social media of her shooting buckets on the driveway, and like snow is everywhere because it just snows most of the time in Maine. But comes back and with high expectations, she's battling the reputation of now that everybody knows how good she can be. Every time she gets the ball, she's never in a one-on-one situation. I mean, it's always 2-3 defenders draped on her. So she went through a very, very brief slump, if you will, once those defenders really started to come on. But now you're seeing the adjustments on her end of being able to pass out of it or move around the double team and things like that. So she's a really intelligent player, obviously very skilled. But just adds so much to what Indiana can do. And the Hoosiers had 56 points in the paint yesterday against Iowa. And I mean, she went to work against one of the better posts in the league in Monica Zanano for Iowa. Just dominated yesterday.
So, Greg, you said at the beginning of the year you thought Ali Patberg would potentially be the conference player of the year. We've seen Grace Berger get a lot of headlines for her play. Mackenzie Holmes has gotten so much better. Who do you think's the MVP of this team? If you had to pick one, I know it's a team and everybody contributes, but you got to pick one. Giving you a vote here, who do you think's been the MVP this year?
I think just by definition of most valuable player, who is the most valued person. If Indiana's going to make a deep run in the NCAA tournament, who's got to play well? And it comes down to Ali Patberg. So in a way, I think she's most important player. I think the most talented player is Grace Berger, just with her ability she's got 3 triple doubles this season, the only 3 in women's basketball history in Indiana, and the only player in women's college basketball with more than 1. And Mackenzie Holmes, I think, is just such a difference maker in the post with her ability. So I'm going to go with Grace Berger. We'll call her MVP, but I'm going to give Mackenzie Holmes with the best season and Ali Patberg the most important player.
That was
a cop-out.
Incredibly diplomatic answer. I love it. I think it's great. I'm all in on this.
Follow Greg for his political career.
You're muted, Andy.
Yeah, make sure everyone to follow Greg's political career as we move forward. That was a real springboard into that arena, I think. So that was it. So as we look forward to the NCAA tournament, IU was a 3rd seed in the latest bracketology from ESPN, which came out on Tuesday. They were 12th overall in the top 16 reveal, which on the women's side they've been doing more frequently. That was from February 28th. They were the 12th overall, so the last 3 seed there. Greg, thoughts on what IU's ceiling is from a tournament perspective? Can they get up to a 2 seed with a certainly beating Purdue and then a deep Big Ten tournament run, or some of the teams in front of them, maybe that's too many teams to have to jump to be able to get up to that 2 line?
Yeah, I think it's possible just with the route maybe going deep in the Big Ten tournament. You're probably looking at either Rutgers or Michigan, which are both going to be 15 to 20 as far as their national ranking. You'll see them in the semifinals, and then barring something very surprising, you'll see Maryland in the championship game, who by those same rankings that had Indiana number 12, Maryland was number 6. So best case scenario, if you run the table in the tournament, win that, I could see you sneaking up to that 2 line. I think a few other teams maybe in front of Indiana have lost since then, since those rankings came out, and Indiana has that win over Iowa since that time. So we'll see. I think by the time the tournament comes around next week, not that it directly affects Indiana, but it's interesting because a lot of the women's tournaments are being played this week. Like the SEC tournament's already gotten underway. A lot of them, with the exception of the Big Ten, because normally the women's tournament's a week before. So normally it would be this week, but the Big Ten's doing something different this year. So they'll kind of know, maybe we'll have a better idea going into the Big Ten tournament to say, okay, we win this, we've got a real shot to be a 2 seed. But I think it's possible. I think the ceiling's definitely there. They lost to Maryland by 4 on the road. They've lost 4 games all year, and they're all by single digits to top 20 teams. So they've beaten everybody they're supposed to. They've gotten a nice couple of wins, especially lately the last month during this win streak with Michigan and Ohio State, and beaten Iowa twice. They gave Maryland a nice early spot. They were down 10-0, I think a minute and a half into the game when the one time that they played Maryland. You take that small section out, you're right there in the game. So they can beat anybody. They know that. They're confident, but it's obviously going to be much more easier said than done.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, certainly looking forward to the Big Ten tournament and seeing hopefully a deep run for them in that event, getting to face Maryland. And that's at that point, if you get to that game, you've picked up another couple good wins when you're there, and it's really a loss to a team that's played that well doesn't hurt you. So I think that kind of becomes a win-win if they can make it that far. So we'll see. It'll certainly test the depth that we talked about before, but looking forward to seeing how they perform. So coming up here in our third segment, we're going to answer your questions, including one about which IU silhouette would be chosen if the Hoosiers had an NBA-style logo. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All right. So
I like that question, but I think the answer is pretty easy.
which one? Oh, the silhouette.
The silhouette. Come on now.
15:45. So that's a total. Doing some math here on time. We have
always fun.
More time than. Yeah, we have more time than normal for questions, but I figured that would be good because we seem to get a lot of questions this week, if I'm thinking of this correctly. So we've got to get.
How many are coaching related?
Not as I tended to bump some of those toward the bottom. I don't even know if Jared posted some of those in there to be honest with you. So let's see. So we got another 405 plus 9. This is so exciting to sit here and watch me try to figure this out like an idiot. All right, 13. All right, yeah, we got about 13 and a half minutes for questions. We have a lot of questions.
Wow,
so
that's a lot. We
can explore as much of them as we need to, but they're yeah, like I said, although we did ask Richie's question about that one, so we can get rid of that. But yeah, we've got a number. We can kind of explore whatever we want to on here, and there's also other questions we can circle back to on the women's side if we want to. So I think we're good there. Let me see. We can. Let's see. That's good. So do they plan to release another top 16 before the actual tournament, or are they not?
I don't think so.
Was that kind of last one?
No.
I assume not, but at least to your point,
yeah,
look at some of the ones in front of them and see who lost with all these other conference tournaments happening. So
yeah, I was watching the Maryland played at noon today. I was watching their women's game on BTN, and they brought that up because Maryland's in a similar spot to IU, but thinking maybe a 1 seed versus IU jumping from a 3 to a 2. Yeah. I guess I never even realized because I knew the women obviously played a week before the men, but I didn't realize that everybody was playing with the exception of the Big Ten. Everybody else is on a normal schedule, I guess.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. Let's start here. Let me look back at this again. All right. 13:29. All right. I'm going to start here in about 15 seconds. And get to 57. Yeah. All right.
What's up, y'all? It's Devontae Green giving you the green light to watch Assembly Call after every IU game. Just don't listen to their opinions about shot selection. Remember, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Go Hoosiers.
And welcome back to the Assembly Call. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Ryan Phillips and Greg Murray. And remember, you need to be subscribed to our email newsletter. We send out a weekly IU news roundup, even during the offseason. And after every game, we send out a detailed post-game analysis. So just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. That's IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. It's now time for our mailbag. All questions, as always, were submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community, which you can learn more about at assemblycall.com/community. All right, so we left a bunch of time for questions, and because we got a bunch of good ones, so we'll just kind of roll through as many of these as we can here in the next 12 minutes or so and go from there. So first one comes from Patrick. If there was an IU basketball style NBA logo, which IU basketball player should make the silhouette? He threw out Smart's championship shot, Steve Alford, or others. Ryan, you said this was an easy answer, so I will throw it to you first.
It's Calbert Cheaney shooting a jump shot. Come on now. I think that's an obvious one. I could see Alford shooting a jumper too, but Calbert is that guy who is just beloved by everybody. There's nobody who says like, yeah, I liked Calbert, but he's not my favorite. Like everybody loves Calbert Cheaney. I think that, and with everything he did at the university and everything he accomplished, I think that's an obvious one. What about you? What are your options? What are other options, Andy? What am I missing?
I assumed you would go with the Killingsworth dunk, so I was disappointed.
Well, that would be if they made the logo specifically for me. It's that or like the Moye block. Like those are the two for specifically tailored to Ryan Phillips.
Can I say that Killingsworth dunk was also my first thought? That was like when I saw the question, it's like, that's the first thing that popped in my mind. That was my first ever college basketball game that I went to live as a kid.
Wow.
And I don't know that I've been in an environment that's beaten that since then. But that moment, that's the first thing I thought of.
So, Greg, that was my senior year at IU, and I was covering the team and on the floor when it happened. It was it's unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
People who were there know what we're talking about. People who weren't don't get it. They don't get it.
Way up into the rafters and below the balcony, way up top. My eyes opened up wide to what college basketball actually is.
And look what your profession is now.
That's right. I can thank Marco Killingsworth for where I'm at.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Absolutely. Yeah, I lean toward the Cheaney one just with him kind of rising up for that lefty jump shot. So I tended to fall there. I think the Moye block would be interesting, although it's kind of odd. You almost want it to be a singular player, not two guys in the logo. So I kind of eliminated that one based solely on that. But if you're thinking, iconic moments, then you could also think Watt shot. But I think Calbert I think that felt like the answer to me. That was my initial gut reaction when I got it. So I'm gonna
Watt shot.
No, the Cheaney one. Cheaney.
Yeah, it's Cheaney or the watch shot. I could see the watch shot too, just to rub it in Kentucky's face.
Yeah, I'll stick with that. All right, this one is from Kathy. Another question for Greg. So how far? Obviously, tough to do. You haven't seen a bracket, anything like that. But how far do you predict the women can go in both the Big Ten and the NCAA tournament?
For Big Ten tournament, I see no reason why they can't go to the final. They've beaten Michigan, who would be, I believe, the 3 seed, maybe Rutgers, who they haven't seen, but I think they're better than both those teams and playing the way they are. I think they could get to the weekend and play what we can assume will be Maryland in the title game, maybe a toss-up on if they can beat Maryland. They'd never beaten them in program history, so we'll see. So we'll call it to the title game there. And NCAA tournaments, it's going to be so different in the women's side because typical years – the top 16 seeds, which Indiana would be one, would host the opening weekend. So they would have, just a huge advantage to be able to play at Assembly Hall and, against a double-digit seed and then maybe like a 4 or a 5 in the second round. Now you're all going to be on a neutral site where it's a little bit more even, but, we'll call it Sweet 16, Elite 8. I see no reason why they can't, live up to where, call it, their seeding is. And then, we've seen this team these last few years been able to beat just about anybody in the country. They took down number 1 South Carolina last year in the non-conference, which was just a monumental win for the program. So I know they believe they can beat anybody, but it's about execution when you get to playing the big boys. And I see second weekend, but certainly with a chance to make it even deeper than that.
All right, this one is from Max, and this is about they came out with some details, I guess, about the NIT, which is only going to be 16 teams, I believe, this year. It's going to take place in Dallas. And so this one was, would you prefer IU play in or sit out the NIT? Basically weighing how depressing another NIT trip would be versus getting the freshmen like Lander more playing time. He added, I can't imagine watching it either way, though. Ryan, where would you come down on this? Jared is all for this because it's in Dallas and you can do whatever you want in Texas these days. So if Jared was so inclined, he could go to the games. But Ryan, what are your thoughts on what IU should do if they end up in that position?
I think you have to go and you have to get your young guys playing time, and a chance to play some teams outside your conference for the first time. And you didn't get to play many of them this year at all. And I think it's just a chance to get more experience for some of those guys. Maybe play Christian Lander some more, Geronimo, Leal, and Galloway, and get them, some extra experience. I think you have to. I don't think you can turn it down.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think it has more benefit. I think some of the arguments against doing it in the past were, do you want to have games at a partially empty Assembly Hall? Do you want to turning down the home game the one year? Things like that. You're not faced with that this year when you don't have those factors into the equation. Like, it can truly just be about what it means from a basketball development standpoint. And in that case, it feels like you should do it. What you get once you get there and things like that is to be determined. Greg, I'd kind of throw this to you with this frame around it. The women's NIT that Tyra Buss and Amanda Cahill were able to win in their final season. Again, this is not an apples to apples comparison by any means, but what do you think that meant? Not necessarily even just from a player development standpoint, but from a program standpoint in their situation of being able to go through, do that, win it. How much do you think that's been a part of the success they've really been able to build over the seasons subsequent to that one?
I think the biggest thing from that season was the ability to gain a different fan base. Playing in the NIT and how big it is. I mean, you're playing, I want to say the championship game was either the 31st of March or maybe even the first couple of days of April. I mean, it was like a day before the Final Four. And so by then, not many teams are playing basketball, whether it's NCAA or not. And I mean, in Bloomington, the fans were coming in droves every round. They played the entire tournament at Assembly Hall. Indiana hosted every round, and 13,000, which, isn't a sellout at the hall, but for a women's basketball game, that's unheard of. And I mean, the atmosphere was so unique and so cool to see the support for the program. And I really think it worked so many wonders to, one, send Tyra Buss and Amanda Cahill out with wins, because not many players get to do that. So that was, I think, a lot of the motivation inside the program was to go out and win it, because teams with motivation and NIT, everybody reacts a little bit differently. But I think the fan support as the program was building to be able to win the NIT, come back, they made the NCAA tournament after that and have continued to go up and up since. That was a huge year. I know they wanted to win the NCAA or to make the NCAA tournament that year. They fell a little short of those expectations, but took advantage of the situation. They won it, and I think are very thankful that it turned out as it did.
Here's one from Kurt. Much has been made about guard play this season. How would you define guard play, given the different roles? What are the specifics used to judge if guard play is great or not? Ryan, I'll let you take that one first.
Thanks. I think just the ability to get the team into things and run them and feel confident that they know what they're doing on offense. I mean, how many times have we seen a guard go up the court and look immediately to the sideline to figure out what are we running? Also, the ability to drive, the ability to find open players, the ability to get to the basket off the bounce, and the ability to knock down shots. I think you need all of those things to have great guard play. And of course, the defensive end is important, but I think that where Indiana has really suffered has been the ability to do things on offense that change a game, that alter the way a defense guards them, instead of just dribble handoff and then hope that Trace Jackson Davis does something. You've got to have consistent guard play from top to bottom in the Big Ten. It's that tough a conference. And there's just really nobody on this team right now who can, off the bounce, go by somebody and get a bucket consistently. And there's nobody who is consistently knocking down shots. And those are the two things that guards are supposed to be able to do. On top of that, obviously, there's the mental part of running the offense and getting guys where they're supposed to be. And, feeding the posts consistently and things like that. We just haven't seen consistency in any of those areas from Indiana's guards this year.
Yeah, I think for me, the consistency is a big piece, and I think the pace of being able to really get out and get the team, not also what you said of getting into sets quickly and doing those things, but also being able to push the ball up the floor and try to get easy opportunities, especially on a team that struggles so at times for stretches in the half court to be able to make shots. When the team plays with a little bit of pace, as they did at times in the Michigan State game, those were the times that the offense seemed to flow the best, and also is what can make defenses uncomfortable. And I think we've talked about that on both ends of the floor. Is too often IU isn't making the defense uncomfortable by really trying to push the issue, and on the flip side, they're letting the opponent get comfortable by not really getting into people enough defensively and some of those kinds of things. So, Greg, for the IU women's team, a guard, kind of guard heavy attack as well. If you think about the trio of Pat Berger and Cardano Hillary, what I guess, how do you define that, and maybe how you define good guard play, and how those three of late have really exemplified that?
Well, I think it starts with running the offense and knowing the offense. I mean, it's, you're running the ball. I mean, you have the ball in your hands nearly every possession. The offense starts with you. And when I had the question earlier of who the MVP of the season is, that's why I fall back to, a sixth-year senior point guard in Ali Patberg, because she is the engine that makes this go. And if she doesn't play well, the team doesn't play well. The team's not going to win if Ali Patberg doesn't show up to play. So I think it's the most important position, and experience is a big factor. And when you can have multiple players that can run the position, beat people off the bounce, go score, and do a lot of different things, it can't be overstated, the importance of that position.
All right, Ryan, I'll throw you one more. We got about a minute left here. And we didn't get your thoughts after the Michigan State game. You weren't on. So Jeff wrote, good to see Lander and Finney on the floor at the same time for a while. What do you see as strengths and weaknesses of them playing together, and is that something that we might see a little bit more of in however many games are left of the season? So I know I'm throwing that to you with about 30 seconds, but thoughts on what you saw from those two guys playing together?
Well, I think that Lander is so much more aggressive than Finney consistently. I mean, Finney showed some aggression the other night and looked to be much more locked in than usual. But I think that Lander's ability to drive into the heart of the defense, and while he has struggled to finish, he's at least willing to do it, kind of balances the fact that Finney is typically a little bit more meek in that area. Obviously, this all depends on whether Finney can become consistent. And so I don't know if we want to see those two together, because I think that, they've both been very inconsistent throughout this season.
We're done. No more questions.
All right. Well, that'll do it for the show. I get to have Ryan interrupt himself, so that's always good. That'll do it for this week's edition of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. Special thanks to Bob Thompson for producing a lot of the music that you hear on the show. And thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again on Saturday after IU Purdue. Until then,
take it from me, Robert Johnson. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
All right. Sorry, Ryan. I know I put you in a tough spot.
That's fine. It was kind of it had to be a long answer to that one, but
yeah,
I would.
You can finish.
You
can finish now.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think that they're both so inconsistent. I mean, Lander's inconsistent because he's too young to be in the Big Ten right now. We all know that. But there are consistency issues with both, and so it's hard to sort of be excited about them both being on the floor because you're constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I think that Rob played better against Michigan State. I am not confident we'll see that in the next game, though, because he's just so up and down and back and forth and all over the place. So, look, next year, if everybody's back, we'll just assume everybody's back. They're going to have to play together a lot, and it would almost certainly have to be Rob coming off the ball and not commanding the offense and Lander leading it, because that's what Lander does for you, is the ability to get up the floor quickly, something that guys on the rest of this team don't really do very well. Get up the floor quickly, get you into your offense, cut, get into the lane, find guys, throw, passes that nobody else on this team can throw. And it would have to be Finney setting up off screens and stuff. And Parker Stewart's probably going to be, I would like to see the guys I would love to see together. And I know Parker's not going to play this year, but the thing I would like to see is Parker, Stewart, and Lander playing together, because Stewart could go hunt shots while Lander carved up a defense and looked for him. And I think that is the pairing that I think really complements each other well out of the guys on the roster currently.
Yeah, I do think it was interesting playing those guys together. We've talked about Rob having better now than during the show, I suppose. But we talked about it, and after the show, I think it does at least give Rob a chance to do some of what he does best. He didn't really shoot well from a spot up standpoint there, but he has rated out well in some of those areas as he's over the course of his career. So there's probably maybe a component of that takes a little bit of the pressure off him and gets back to a little bit of the pace stuff that I talked about earlier. But I don't know. There's enough season left to know whether experimenting a whole lot more with that is worthwhile or not. So I'm gonna hit one more for both of you guys, and then we can wrap up here. So this one's from Lee. What is the reason for the shooting discrepancy between high school and college? Most of the IU team were scorers in high school. Is it defense, maturity, strength training? He even threw out basketball gods hating IU.
Could be that.
Could be that. Greg, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Just kind of the translation of that particular skill from high school to college, and what you think may lead to some rough transitions at times for players.
I think a lot of it obviously it's different with every player, but from a mental capacity, I think catching up to the speed of the game is so critical to, these players that come into a Big Ten program. They shoot thousands of shots. It's not like they're not talented players, but they're probably much more accustomed to being able to either get to the rim or shoot whenever, wherever. And now all of a sudden you have players that are probably, maybe not always for freshmen, but say you step out on the floor as a freshman, there's a good chance that 6 or 7 other players on the floor are better than you are and faster than you are and maybe more skilled at certain pieces than you are. And so I think it's so much of everything's moving so quickly that you got to catch up. And if you're in a rush, maybe you're rushing your shot and things like that. So I feel like the adjustment of the speed of the game has a lot to do with it, but it could be hands to the face that they're just not used to, deep, defenders against them. It could be a lot of things, but I guess speed was what I thought of first.
Yeah, I think it's speed and size. I think the fact that people closing out to you are also more athletic than what you faced in high school, and there's more of a chance to get your shot blocked. I think people rush their shots way too much, and I get it. It's getting used to the pace. You even saw it with Anthony Leal early in the year. He was rushing everything. That guy's a shooter. He can knock down shots, and he was just rushing because you see that guy over there is 6'5" and has length, as opposed to the guys you were facing in high school who are 6 foot and maybe have a little bit of athleticism. So I think that's a lot of it. I think guys get in their own head about it. I also think just playing at the next level, you rush everything. You rush your cuts a little bit. You rush your passes. You rush your dribble. That's why guys dribble it off. You see freshmen dribble it off their legs, something they never do their entire lives. And then they get to college and they start doing things like dribbling off their legs or jumping in the air and passing and, things like that they know not to do, but they do because they get ahead of themselves. So I think that's the big change for me. Also, just the competition level's better. The defense is better. You're not getting 10 feet between when you and a few seconds between when you catch the ball to set up for your shot and launch it. You're getting 3 feet and a couple, like milliseconds to set yourself. So I just think that all of that factors in, and I think guys, get in their own head about it as well, more than maybe they do in high school, because let's be real, games mean more the higher up you go.
Yep. All right, cool. Well, I think that hit most of the questions. So if we got a couple others to carry over, there were some coaching ones that I don't know that makes a ton of sense to get into. So I think we hit the high points for sure. So Greg, appreciate you joining us again. Best of luck with the new little one coming. Do you guys know,
man,
boy or girl, or do you not know?
Yeah, a little boy. And I've seen it in the chat. I know we mentioned it at the beginning. There is not a child currently in this crib behind me. Coming soon. But
we'd know if there was, people. Come on.
Yeah, just right over there. He just wanted to tune into assembly call with me.
That would be the gutsiest move that anyone could make is broadcasting, is trying to do any kind of recording with a child in the crib behind them. So I would have even more respect for you if you had even attempted that. But I think you'll learn quickly that is not the best idea.
Yeah, 2 babies due in under 2 weeks, so we're in that realm, and I'm hoping it can be spaced out around these women's games, but we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, best of luck. I hope.
I appreciate it, guys.
I hope for one of the potentially the only times in this young man's life they listen to what you want and come at a time that does not interfere with the games, and then you can go from there.
I can wish. I'm not. I'm not confident, but we'll see. I'm trying.
Absolutely. All right. Well, best of luck with that to you and your family, and enjoy the rest of the women's games. And thanks again for coming on. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it, guys.
Thanks
Have
for
a great
coming,
night.
buddy.
All right.
No problem.
Thanks, Chat Mob. We'll see you guys on Saturday.
Are you going to be here, Andy?
I am not. I don't know who is.
I don't either.
But I am not. So I'm not really.
Okay.
I'm not really sure. We'll figure it out. Someone will be here. We'll get that part figured out. But it will not be me, at least at this point, unless something changes with my schedule. So.
All right, guys. Later.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.